Hi, my name is Lawrence Elliott. Very few people know me by Lawrence Elliott. My name is given at birth. My mother started calling me Lucky, so that's been with me throughout my life. So anybody that knows me will call me Lucky. People that went through school with me, elementary, high school, still don't know my name. But I grew up in a neighborhood called the Berg. I was born at 306 Pendleton Street, and I guess in my preteen years, lived in that neighborhood. It was 4 square city blocks of housing projects. And during that time, the people in the housing projects really took care of the community. They took care of the kids in the community. Everybody looked out for each other. They shared their resources and they watched over the kids. I grew up playing in the neighborhood, but I was a very sick child as a kid. I had asthma really bad and really didn't understand about the environmental impact until I became a young adult, really. That the Berg, even though the people in the Berg took care of their property, they had flowers, they had yards and the manicured lawns, and they only had small plots, but everybody took care of the yards and took care of their homes. We had a courtyard where all the kids would play. I've seen projects throughout the country when I've traveled in different places, and the projects in Alexandria, they're outstanding compared to some that I've seen in Florida and in Georgia and other places. They really were in bad shape, as you may want to say it. And it wasn't a place that you wanted to raise your family. So the ones in Alexandria here, the projects, the 4 square blocks of projects that I grew up in, they were outstanding, and the people in the neighborhood. But one of the things people don't know and I never thought about is we were surrounded, the projects, by a fertilizer mill, which was only a block and a half from my front door, Bogle Chemical Company, a pesticide company. You had Norton's Bone and Fat that processed bone and fat from stores and Safeways and different places like that. And all of that, in addition, they had a Texaco plant that was right across the street from the projects, these big oil tanks. And on the other side of the projects was the AB&W bus company, where you had all of these buses parked right across the street from the projects. And all you got was the fumes from buses leaving out there all day long. So it wasn't the ideal situation to be brought up in that environment. And like I said before, I had asthma really bad, and that was something that I thought about after I got older. That was might have been part of the problem that I was suffering with asthma so bad. But I lived on Princess Street, as I said before. A block away from my house was a place they called the bunk house. And the bunk house was where all of these black men stayed. It was just full up of double-decker bunks. And the stench and the smell of the fertilizer was all over the place. We as kids would go down and peep in and look in. It'd take your breath away. So I had no business being down there anyway. But up until about 12 years old, when I started to turn into a teen, we moved 2 blocks over into a unit in the housing projects. And that unit, across the street from that unit, was a playground. And I mean, the playground had everything on it, a jungle gym that could hold about 15 kids at one time, monkey bars, high bars, a big sliding board, half a dozen or more swings. We had a basketball court, we had a baseball field. And so that's where I began to start to be active in playing sports. But prior to that, as preteen, we had adults, not adults, but young guys in high school that taught the little kids how to play sports. We didn't have all of those fathers in the neighborhood that were out there throwing baseballs or throwing footballs to the kids. It was always the teenagers, and I credit a lot of those guys for the next generation of kids coming up like me that were able to play some sports. So they would teach us how to throw the ball, catch the ball. And when I moved over on Pendleton Street, which is like 2 blocks over, the playground, that was my hangout. It was because I could walk across the street and it was a playground. And one thing on that playground, which was about a large field that was almost 2 football fields wide. It was only one building there, and that was the Alexandria Redevelopment Housing Authority building. But each summer, the city of Alexandria would open that site as a playground. In other words, they put a big box out there. They would hire a couple of professionals. They could be school teachers or what have you. They would work on the playground during the summer. And they come out with the big playground box. In the box, they would have all kinds of table games, horseshoes, basketballs, footballs, volleyballs, whatever you want. It was in this big box and container, and they had a big picnic table out that they would put out for the kids, and they would teach you arts and crafts. So this went on all summer long, in addition to intramural basketball games or softball games that we would compete against other playgrounds in the area. So I began to play sports on that playground, but I also played all the table games and anything. I didn't realize that until I found years later all of these awards that I had won as a kid on the playground that my mother had stored away from me. And I was checker champion for several years because nobody beat me in checkers. I remember the kids didn't want to play me because they said I wouldn't stop talking. But that was a habit. Anything I did, I was always talking. When I played sports, I was always talking. So a lot of people didn't like that, to play against somebody that continuously talked like I did. But as I said, these teenagers that taught me how to play sports. I can remember going to the football game with these guys that lived in the Berg that taught me how to play sports. And they were on the 1957 championship team of Parker Ray High School. The majority of the skilled players on that team, they came out of my neighborhood. The quarterback was on my street, on Princess Street, Arbor Green. You had Petey Armstrong with the fullback. My brother played in. You had the Drayton brothers who were in the backfield. Eugene Drayton was one of the running backs. So I really felt proud about coming out of the Berg. And these guys, these are the athletes that were my role models. Excuse me, they were my role models because seeing them play on a high school team and then knowing they were champions, that made me really feel good about being, one of the guys that wanted to go to Parker Gray. I can remember going to the high school games before I went in high school in the 7th grade. I played on the 7th grade basketball team, and we played intramural sports. And we would play guys from St. Joseph Catholic School, which was only a block away from Charles Houston Elementary School, and we would compete against those guys. And there were some really good basketball players there because they only had a basketball court. St. Joseph is located on Columbus Street and Width, and it was a Catholic school that had 4 rooms, 2 grades to each room. So they went to the 8th grade. Charles Houston, we only went to the 7th grade. So we all united, the guys that we played against, in the 9th grade. And I had already made it to the JV. I was on JV, one of the few people that played JV in the 8th grade. So I played basketball every year that I was in high school. But I remember going to Parker Gray and wanted to play on the team when I went to one of the games when I was in elementary school. And the atmosphere was so high, the school spirit, the student body and everything, and it made you want to go to Parker Gray High School. But I went on to play Parker Gray at Parker Gray. I was captain for 2 years. My junior and senior year, I was captain of the basketball team. I had a lot of memories, good memories about playing with Parker Gray because I ended up, when I look back, I played with a couple of guys. One was named Lewis Harris, who went on to play professional for Pittsburgh Steelers. And the other guy was named Jim Lewis. And he went on, he made all Metro in the city, went on to coach at high schools, college, George Mason University, and was the first coach of the Mystics professional women's basketball team. So I look back on these memories of these guys that I played with. In addition, after I stopped playing with these guys, I played with North Virginia Community College. When they first had they opened, they had a basketball team. And I went to North Virginia Community College when they were on Calling Springs Road up, and they were in warehouses. And back during in the '60s, I went there and I realized that all the classes were taken, they filled up so fast that all of the white boys that had the money and resources, the ones that didn't go to Canada, were registering at North Virginia Community College to duck the draft. So a lot of them didn't go into the service because they were in North Virginia Community College and they took up all the classes. So I really didn't get what I wanted to stay for a while and dropped out, but I eventually went back years later and majored in recreation and park management. But going back and looking back at Parker Gray was one of my great experiences in high school. But I started my employment at Western Electric, which is now at Pentagon, out at Pentagon City. It's a big Costco center. And I worked at Western Electric, and when I was there, I was taking classes at North Virginia Community College and also working part-time with the recreation department. Now, my name is, I guess, synonymous with youth sports, and people identify me as being a youth sports leader, a basketball, or football coach, because I have been coaching for a number of years. I started as a volunteer when I was in high school, coaching youth sports. And the thing about coaching is that I went on to coach youth sports in 3 areas of the city. And that's why a lot of people, they identify me because I coach on what they call the Hill or the South Side. I coached in the Burg at Parker Madden, and I coached at Charles Houston, the Charles Houston community. So I coached for 2 decades, youth sports. And then when I coached 2 football teams per year. And I coached 3 basketball teams, right behind, one game behind the other, 3 basketball teams while I was coaching. So a lot of those kids stayed with me for a number of years. They came out maybe as an 8-year-old and didn't stop playing until they were 14-year-old. I always think back on the T.C. Williams 77 team that went 32-0. 4 of those guys, 2 of the starters, were the kids that I coached for several years. And one, Craig Harris, went on to play in the Capital Classic against Magic Johnson. And he was the MVP of the Capital Classic. So I like to hang my hat on being, known to have worked with these guys. And in addition, 14 of these young men in the city I coached for a number of years are in the Alexandria Public Schools Hall of Fame. So I like to think that I did have a hand in what they were doing, although I don't take all the credit because I know they went on and other coaches worked with them in the high schools and so forth. I think I picked up some of the things that they were teaching me, and I passed them on to the kids. It was just something I started doing because, as I said before, I had asthma and didn't think that I was going to ever be able to do anything. So I would sneak out to the starter playing and doing things. And I had, as a teen, I had a couple of asthma attacks and stuff, and especially outside the weather change, the summer, the spring. But what they taught me, and instilled in me the fundamentals and things that they started with. I was able to do that with the other little kids in the neighborhood before I actually got involved with the city and coaching a team with the city. So when I started coaching with the city, it was a segregated program. The black neighborhoods played against each other. And that's the way it was. And as I continued to coach over the years, they started to integrate the program. But one of the things I remember as a young kid is that I lived on, when we moved to Pendleton Street, the playground was in front of us, but behind the playground was Flickman School. And Flickman School had a stadium where the white kids played, and they had uniforms, equipment, and what have you. And at night, when it lit up, we were looking right at the lights from the project. So we would go up to the field. But I didn't understand about the segregation as a kid. I didn't understand, my world was in projects, and I knew certain places I didn't go and weren't supposed to go, and your parents would tell you where you didn't go. As I said, I grew up in the projects, but every Sunday, my parents, we were going to Sunday school and church. That was a given. You could stay out all night if you wanted, but you're going to be at church on Sunday morning. So it was a man in the neighborhood that would come around and knock on the doors of the projects where everybody had kids, and he would walk all the kids from the Berg down Princess Street and the projects, and walk them straight up to Ebenezer, which is right up here on Queen Street. And I always think when I come here to the library, this Queen Street Library, I remember Sundays we would walk on that brick wall and jump over the steps. And it was just the big slabs. It wasn't bushes or anything there, but we would run down that brick wall and jump over the walkway right here at the Queen Street Library going to Sunday school or church. But that was where a lot of the kids got their background in the church and the Bible studies and what have you. But I started, as I said, working with the kids in the program, and then by being on the playground every summer and working with those professionals, it got to the point where they would just leave the box open, leave me in charge, and because I lived right across the street, give me the key. And kids at 5 o'clock, I'd open the playground back up. We would have the horseshoes, they had the basketball, and nobody took anything. They put it right back in the box, in the evening, or they bring it to my house and leave it at my house. The balls, people knock on the door, get the basketball or football, and I would hand it to the guys, go across the street and play on the field. But I left Western Electric to take a job with the city of Alexandria as a assistant youth sports supervisor, because I had been coaching for a number of years. And somebody thought that would be a good opportunity for me to come into the rec department. And I came in, worked almost a year and a half, and it was a big shakeup in the rec department, and they decided to offer me the job of the new Charles Houston Recreation Center, and the center had just opened in about a year. But apparently they had someone in there that apparently couldn't do the job, and they sent me there. It was a new facility, and I admit that everybody couldn't do that job, because at the time it was really a rough neighborhood, and had I not been from the community, I don't think I would have been able to say that if I wasn't from the community, because I had the backing of a lot of the participants. And it was hardcore neighborhood, but I had the backing of a lot of those athletes that I had coached coming up, and they were playing at high school level and some were even out of school. But they kept things down for me. If I came and wanted something done, they would help me get it done. And so I was the director of the Charles Houston Center. I started some new and innovative programs. I started the Alexandria Boxing Club. And although some of the city officials didn't want it there, I was able to convince the risk manager of the city to go forward, and he said, well, treat it like any other sports. And then Jim Moran was the mayor at the time. He came by and he got me the boxing ring, the money appropriated for boxing ring and a lot of the equipment. The Alexandria Boxing Club is still one of the programs that's going on to this day, and I think we started it back in '81. So it's still one of the programs that I started when I was at Charles Houston. But I had a lot of good people around me that supported me. A lot of good staff people. I don't take want to take a lot of credit for anything. I've received over 3 dozen community service awards here in the city of Alexandria. I've got 6 proclamations from the mayor and city councils over the years. I've been inducted to Fairfax County Youth Football Hall of Fame. I've been inducted to the Alexandria School Hall of Fame up there at the Alexandria High School. I received NAACP Community Service Awards, Community Service Award from the Urban League, United Way, a number of the civil community organizations like the Parliamental Club and the Elks Lodge. And so I've, received a number of awards, but I give a lot of credit to people that have supported me over the years, that have backed me, and so I don't take credit. I stand on the shoulders of a lot of people that came before me. It wasn't easy, and it was always a challenge, and people don't understand the subtle racism that I experienced here in the city of Alexandria, even in the recreation department. And I started off as a young teen when I realized that I walked in the distance from the 300 block of Pendleton Street where I lived. I would have to walk past the Alexandria skating ring. That was the bowling alley, the Ficklin School Stadium, and right across the street from that was the theater, movie theater, Virginia Theater. In addition to, you had Hot Shop a couple blocks over on Washington Street that was taboo for us to use. So all of the kids that we were in the projects, and these things were like 2-3 blocks away from our house, and we couldn't use them. So that's the way it was. But I have a lot of feelings for it, because I look at a lot of other kids and how they were impacted and how it impacted them. Now, I grew up, you had to have tough skin. The guys that grew up in my neighborhood, we played what you call the dozens. And that's when you crack jokes on each other, and you crack jokes, and anything they know about you, your family, your house, and anything, they would crack jokes. And if you couldn't take it, you were going to be the butt of a whole lot of jokes, So I consider myself, a survivor. A lot of kids that grew up, they didn't have an opportunity to experience some of the things that I had the opportunity to experience. And I was fortunate to marry a beautiful woman who was really smart, and we have traveled the world. We've been on every continent except Antarctica. And we've seen all the wonders, the man-made and natural wonders of the world at different places. So, and she's my best friend, my partner. So I give a lot of credit to my wife, because oftentimes I would say I wasn't going to do certain things, and she would tell me, yeah, you should do that. You should do that. Even in addition to doing this oral interview, which, she pushed me to go ahead and do it, so.
She's from Alexandria as well?
Yeah, she's Alexandrian, and we have, we raised 2 kids, adults, and I consider myself to be lucky. I've had a good run. I've had a good run, as I said, So I like to think of guys like Arbor Green. They call him Spit. He was the one that first introduced me to quarterbacking and throwing the footballs to me, teaching us how to run the football. And the guy that lived 2 doors from us, that he's a well-known person in the community. His name is Morris Seibert, and he lived a couple doors from me. And he was one of the people that worked on the playground during the summer, and he was one of the guys that would take us to the recreation center, which was called the USO at the time, on between Henry and Patrick Street on Pendleton Street. And we would go there. He would have the whole gym, maybe 50 or 60 kids, and he would run us through calisthenics and conditioning, and he would teach us how to play basketball. But it was one man that controlled all these kids in this one gym. And I can remember he would make us stand at attention. The phone ring, he would go get the telephone, and we would all be at attention. We'd stand there until he got back, make a sound. And so I learned how to organize and do things watching him as a kid, and saw how he controlled a large group of kids. And that's why I was able to coach 3 basketball teams in the season. And it went on for a number of years until the scheduler with the city couldn't schedule all the games back to back, and they would send them all over the city. But that was coaching those kids and dominating and winning. I don't know how many championships the Charles Houston kids won, but the kids, I never changed what I was doing. It was always conditioning and fundamentals. So the kids at Charles Houston, if they started on a 10 and under team, and they went 10 and under a couple of years, 12 and under, 14 and under, then nothing changed. They improved because they was fundamentally sound. And as I said, I had kids at one team, I coached 14 under. The whole 14 under team was the freshman team the next year at the high school, at Hammond High School. So I contributed a lot that I've done to having a lot of good people around me. And I look back on some of the things people think that stand out was the impact of drugs on the city. And when I was working at Charles Houston Recreation Center, 2 blocks of Alpha Street, nobody could go there walking or driving. It was just filled with people selling and using drugs. And I was in the middle of the drug epidemic, and there's a whole newspaper, the whole paper on the article that I'm in, explaining about what was the impact and what was happening with the drugs there. And after that hit the Washington Post, I had to meet with the mayor, city manager, everybody wanted to know what they could do. And out of that came the substance abuse program. And so they end up getting counselors, we end up getting methadone treatments. And during that process, I led several drug marches through the city here of Alexandria. I started an organization I was one of the co-founders of the organization called We Care. And we marched from the Charles Houston Recreation Center through Alexandria and down to City Hall, where we had a rally and demonstration at City Hall. And the funny part about that was we marched through the city, and we had elderlies and people with canes and so forth marching. And when we got a couple blocks from City Hall, some of the politicians jumped out of the cars, took the signs from the kids, marched up to City Hall, and got their photo op coming into Market Square for the demonstration. And I always think about that as how funny that was, but we dramatized the impact of drugs in the city. And it probably was the only, or probably the first anti-drug demonstration probably in the country. I've never heard anybody even mention anything about having an anti-drug march prior to, the one that I led, and I did it for several years. We made it an annual thing, and to keep the funding, to keep funding for the program, and made sure it just didn't go away. So we did it for several years, and we started a program that I was certified through Dr. George Loganell and John Linden, who were drug counselors, and just certified me to teach a program called Get Away Clean. And I incorporated the Get Away Clean program with the basketball program. In other words, kids had to come to the classroom, and the program was designed to teach kids how to stay away from negative peer pressure and how to change their friends into positive attitudes. And that was to help them keep away from the drugs. And so that program took off. Matter of fact, it was recognized by the mayor and city council, and we trained other people to teach kids how to get away clean program. So the one I had was real successful because the kids would do it because they knew at the end they was gonna play basketball. So, but that was one of the things that I really look back on was the drug march, and
What year did you start that?
we did the drug march, and I think it was 87. I think it was 87, 88, 89. There are several articles in the newspaper about them, pictures of everything. I'm on, leading the march and so forth in the paper. So there were several articles. But I go back to when I was born in 1944. My family, I don't know, and even Charles Barsh tried to do some research on my family and that. She was able to get my mother's side of the family, but my father's side, I know my father came from Lynchburg, and I know some of his relatives. And because of the way we were in the city, we lived in the Burg, and my mother's family were the Burgess. And they lived in what they call the bottom, and on Apple Street or Columbus Street. They lived right there on the corner of Wolf and Apple Street, right down off of Duke Street. And I didn't realize, I knew people when I'm roaming around the streets. We always grew up respecting the elderly. That was something that was embedded to us, and you didn't want to do anything that would give your family a name, a bad mark in your family's name. And I know that when I was a kid, I could roam away from the house, and it was like a echo chamber. My mother could holler out the door, and the neighbor down the alley, or down the street and across the court, they would holler my name. They would be in the house, and they would holler my name. It was like a PA system. I said, "Oh, time to go home." So, hey, you heard your name, look at it. And everybody started hollering your name. Even kids in the street would start hollering. So it's time to step. Get back home. But we had some really good times as a kid growing up. Nobody locked the doors. We had screen doors. You could take a shortcut if you wanted to get through. You could go through somebody's house and through the living room and bump out the kitchen or whatever to the next. Take shortcuts through people's houses, But everybody took care of each other, and they looked out for each other's kids, and you had to respect the adults. And regardless if you're across town somewhere, and I know that I could be in a neighborhood, and people would always identify me as a Burgess. And that's my mother's side of the family, And I didn't realize till I became an adult that I was given a picture, and I thought the picture was me. And I said, "No, I saw a cigar in this person's hand, a young adult or whatever." and it was my uncle. And I never knew why people would always call me by my uncle's name in the street as a kid, as a young kid and stuff like that. They would identify me, and if you were out of your neighborhood and you heard somebody call your name, and you were doing something you had no business. It was gonna be to your house before you got there, and half the people didn't have telephones, So we were trying to figure how they would get it before you got home. The people would know you were doing something you had no business doing in the street. Yeah, I this happened. It may be but 20 years ago, and I talked to the guy every now and then, and I met a guy that lived. It was a door. There was the projects. The unit that we lived in on Princess Street, it was a 4-bedroom unit. It's very few out there. The projects had 4 bedrooms. So we had a 4-bedroom, and what happens is you see the unit, but one of the bedrooms or 2 of the rooms go over top a 1-bedroom that's under you. And then there was another house. And this guy I ran into, he started talking about his mother had passed, and he talked about my mother, and he was sort of saying things, and I looked kind of puzzled. And then he said, "You didn't know that my mother was taking care of his family." And I was kind of perplexed about what are you talking about? His mother was sick for several months. She had cancer or something. He said, my mother was feeding them and taking care, washing their clothes, going next door. And she was saying that they were taking care of him, and she organized, I guess, some other women to help them. And she said he remembers that my mother was taking care of them for quite a while, and I never knew it. And I knew that she did things like that in the community. I've seen her take stuff, potatoes or apples or something, put them in a bag and tell you, take it to this neighbor thing there, or give me some change. I've seen her give me change in a towel paper bag and tell me to take it to so-and-so. And I never, knew what was going on. I just did what I was told. But I found out in talking to other people over years, how they would always, a couple of guys would call me Mama Janie. My mother's name was Janie. So growing up, I was hit with different nicknames. They used to call me Huckabuck and Hawk and things like that, and Mama Janie, and then Mama, they make it shorter, the guys that were really close to me that would come to my house and that kind of stuff. But nothing ever stuck with me. It was always back to Lucky, it was always Lucky from day one. And my mother gave me that name because I was born in the housing projects, and there's a little more to that story that she always, when she get angry, she would tell me about it. But I was born in the projects in 1944. Now, I've heard different stories about when the projects were built. I've even heard them say the projects were built in 1945, and I'm thinking, yeah, where was I if I was in the project in 44? So I see now that they've torn down 2 of those square blocks, and those 2 square blocks you had on the east side, the 2 square blocks were called the old projects. Across the street, on the other 2 square blocks, they were called the new projects. And we would always laugh and joke about it. Guys, identify where you live. I live in the old projects, live in the new projects. But one story, it was these kids who want to fight at the rec center when I was the director of the recreation center. And I went out, break up the fight. And, and I can be pretty loud. People say that I be pretty loud, And I didn't realize and didn't understand this until I became an adult, that I came out of a family of 10. No one in my family cursed or used profanity or any foul language. I'm the only one. And my sister and brothers, they don't know where. My mother and father never used it. And they say they don't know where I got it from. But when I use it, I can use it, But getting back to the kids fighting out there, I broke up the fight. and asking the kids, where you from? And the kids said, I'm from the Berg, and the other kid, I'm uptown. And so I'm talking, I said, you in the Berg? I said, I used to live in the Berg. That's where I grew up. And it got quiet. You couldn't hear a pin drop. Yeah, I grew up in the Berg. And I said, where'd you live? And the kid said, I lived down on Pendleton. He said, 306. I said, oh, 306. I said, is it still a hole in the floor? You go up the steps, under the steps. And he looked at me and I said, yeah. I said, that's the house I grew up in. And from that day on, instant credibility and respect from all of those kids that the guy running the recreation center grew up in the Berg. And I tell people today, do you know that the mayor for several years came out of the Berg? The police chief, the black police chief, Earl Cook came out of the Berg. Mayor Ewell came out of the Berg. Those athletes that I talked about, the championship football team, they came out of the Berg, you know. So it was also a man in the Berg that his name was Leonard Calloway. We used to call him the mayor of the Berg. There was an article on him in the Journal or Gazette packet. He was the mayor of the Berg. And I remember he recruited me to be a member of the community action team. It was called CAT. It was like forerunner of the police relations team. And I was the youngest member on there. And the group ended up with ID cards and things to identify them because we were able to intervene in riots or large groups of people because you had, well, there was one kid that got shot at the 7-Eleven out there in Delray, and back when, racial tensions and things were high in the city. So this organization was put together to kind of, to intervene and to raise money to get these young people out of jail if they went to jail, and to intervene to keep them from going to jail or even getting killed or shot in a rioting situation. And I was the youngest member on there. They recruited me because I had a connection with the teens. And the funny thing about it is that the community action team met at the jail. The jail was right across the street from the projects. When I lived on Princess Street, the jail was 2 blocks away at City Hall. And when they built a new jail, they put it on Pitt Street, 2 blocks away, across the street from the housing projects. So they would have meetings on Saturday mornings at 10 o'clock, and I would duck the meetings because I didn't want to be seen coming out of the jail, because that's when the snitches go into jail. So they would always get on me about not showing up to meetings. I would get my information from the guys when they come out of the meeting. I'd say, oh, my mother made me do something. I'd make up an excuse why I would duck the meetings. But that was one of the things I used to laugh and joke about. I would duck the meetings and stuff, But I was a member of that community action team in the city, and how they thought enough of me to put me on that community action team. And, and I would like to just thank a lot of the people that have endorsed me and nominated me for, different public recognitions and awards and stuff. I have a whole box full of I never had an ego wall there, but I got 2 plastic tubs full of all the plaques and awards and medals and certificates and what have you, proclamations and so forth. It's always been the Berg, and people that spell it B-E-R-G and the B-U-R-G, but it was supposed to have been settled by a lot of free slaves that came out of Petersburg. And people that, what they hear, they just sound off the bird, and that's the way it comes out. Some people, the bird, but I was just some pronunciation or whatever. But people, have done it. You're correct. There are people that say, but it's the bird, Well, as I said, change is inevitable. It's going to change. I've learned to deal with it, understand it, because I've traveled a lot internationally. I've been blessed with having the resources, and ability to travel the world. And I've seen other cities, and I know that in Europe and other countries, you have buildings that have been standing for hundreds of years. And we're in a new world here, and where they don't build anything to last. And the architecture and the designs in some cities and places, they're getting uglier and uglier. It's just a box with some windows on them now. But I've seen change, and things are going to continue to change. And you run out of land, and so you start building up, and you pack people on top of each other. So it's something that people have to adapt to. You're going to have to adapt if you want to live in a city, or you're going to just have to move out of it. And just make the most of it. That's you only get one go round in life, and you best take every opportunity and chance you have to enjoy your life, because life is short. I look around today and say, where did all the years go? I had to really think about where I was and what I was doing at what decade. But all I could say is enjoy your life, because you only have one life, and you better enjoy it. So other than that, that's my story, and I'm sticking with it, I guess. I started with having lunch with a couple of guys I went to school with. There's 12 guys that I went through elementary school and high school with that are still surviving, and they're still here. And in addition, I've reached out to other guys in Alexandria, and that went to Parker Gray, or may not have went to Parker Gray, and we meet once a month. But prior to that, I had a couple of my friends that I went through school with, and both have passed now, that we started a group called the Bulldog Connection. Parker Gray High School, their mascot was a bulldog. And I had access to the Departmental Progressive Club. So I started to have a program called Sports Legend Night, where we honor those athletes that I talked about previously, and we had an award celebration for them, their family, and anybody that was still around. Each program was completely sell out. The house was packed. So we call it Sports Legend Night, and each year we did it Black History Month. We would pick 5 or 6 guys, and we would go back. Some of them I didn't even know, but I got from word of mouth, and then we vetted the information from them, and we honored those guys. In addition, we moved into a program called the Champions of Quality and Justice. And that's where we honored the community leaders, the people that stepped out and stepped up and spoke out for people that couldn't speak out and fight for themselves. So all of these community leaders or civil leaders and stuff, people that never got any recognition for what they've done to help people get food or housing or jobs. These were the people out that started protesting, for jobs and helping people get jobs and so forth. So we had a program called Champions of Equality and Justice, and we did that during Black History Month, and we celebrated those individuals with plaques and awards, and we gave them their flowers. So that was 2 of the programs that we did with that group. So I've actually, one of my friends always would joke if somebody started talking about something that I've done, and he would bring up I was doing that when they were kids. He said, I said, we having a meeting and you take the notes. And he would always joke about it. He said, he just walk and say, I would walk up to him and say, we having a meeting tonight. We're going to do this. And he said, so I was always organizing things and they would always joke about it, so. And yeah, we meet once a month. I have a group of guys that meet once a month, and like clockwork, they can't wait. They're like children. We want to show up, and they come in, laugh, and joke, and the whole thing is to stay connected with each other, and that's what we try to do: stay connected. People that it said that the people that stay connective and keep their minds active, that they live longer, and have a better quality of life. And that's what I try to do with the guys. And my wife saw that I was doing this several years ago and said, why don't we have women do it? So then she puts out a blast, and it's about 35 people that show up for lunch in Alexandria at one of the restaurants, whatever restaurant that would take us. We would, meet there, and and it's been real successful over the last few years. The group is continuously grow because people hear about it. Well, can I come? Yeah. So it's once a month. She has a group that meets once a month too. So men and women, and so it's worked out. So yeah, we try to keep we try to keep active and keep doing things.